And so actually this, you are my guinea pigs. I feel that always when I speak to whatever audience, they become guinea pigs because I experiment. So I hope you can be with me. I like guinea pigs. I like guinea pigs very much, so it's not a bad word. But because this presentation that I'm showing, I normally do it over, 3 hours, 2.5, 3 hours. So I've cut it down. But I'm not sure how much time it takes. So let's see. I might skip a few pictures. I try to keep the eye on the clock. I know when we're going to finish. I know when the questions and answers are coming. And I will also try to speak slow enough. But Spirit of Humanity Forum, it's an organization based in Iceland, and it started with friends of the BKs having a meeting in Global Retreat Center, wanting to create a peace forum, which was originally intended to be in Oman. But things changed, as you know, when we have plans and ideas come and Baba come into the picture. And so it ended up becoming something called Spirit of Humanity Forum, and its base is in Iceland, and it has continued for now 12 years. So we have a conference for leaders and change makers every second year. And Brahma Kumaris is a partner in this. So we work together with others, and I love that. I'm much more comfortable when I work in collaboration with others than only presenting BK things. Because when I only present from a BK perspective, sometimes I feel it can be a little bit limited and a little bit that people can feel they are being preached at. So I'm very pleased. But I won't go more into that because to explain more, I could another time, but I think I have to start with today's topic. So healing karmic pain is actually about trauma. It's it's a slideshow presentation that I created, inspired by material I studied about trauma. And I feel that when we say healing karmic pain, it becomes clearer from a BK perspective. I get a lot of things covering my screen. Maybe I can just move it to the side. So let's see. So it's about exploring a new window of understanding ourselves. So I feel when we understand about trauma, it's not only to understand about what the world is going through and to understand why people can become very negative or very violent. When we start to see the pain that people are carrying, and when pain is overwhelming, it can lead to very irrational and very violent behavior. And for me, when I can see that, it makes me more compassionate. And I understand how Baba sees when Baba feels so much mercy for the world. So understanding trauma is very much understanding that people are in pain. But not only people outside, we also Brahmins carry trauma. And sometimes we get locked in negative circles because we don't see ourselves, we don't understand why our sanskaras are not changing, because usually that's how we look at it. We have to change our sanskaras. We even think about erasing our sanskars, erasing negative sanskars and replacing them with positive or divine sanskars. But since I started to look into this topic of trauma, it gave me another window of understanding. And I always like when my horizon can become wider, when I can understand something from different angles. So it's about discovering compassionate ways to support lasting transformation, starting inside, of course. Let's see how I can change here. So now is the question if I can show, this is a film and it's a YouTube link. And so normally I could show this, so I hope it works technically. I will try. If it doesn't, I will just skip it and explain. But this film clip comes from the film, a bigger film that put me into searching or studying this topic from the beginning is a film called The Wisdom of Trauma, which is focused on Dr. Gabor Mate's work, who is famous in the field of trauma and who brings very refreshing and new understanding of what trauma is and healing of trauma. So in this film, there is this clip. And this clip comes from an organization which is working with prisons and people in prisons. And it's called Compassion Prison Project. And the woman, Fritzi Holmsberg, I think her name is Fritzi anyway, she's very bold. I mean, she's very courageous to do this kind of work, but she has a heart of gold. And so this clip touched me very deeply, and many of you may have seen this before because I think it got quite famous. I'll start it up and I see if I can find also then what do you call it, the text below. You tell me if you can hear the sound and everything has to work. Do you hear music now?
I cannot hear the sound, but I can see the film.
And it should be sound, so maybe I have to go and check here. I think I need to share sound, optimize. Yes, here it is. Can you sound now?
Yes, now we can hear it. Great.
This is from a high security prison in California. And they are about to learn something about
It's time now, everyone. We're gonna do the compassion trauma circle. Is everyone ready to face their past with compassion? Is that a yes? While you were growing up, during your first 18 years of life, if a parent or other adult in the household often or very often would swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you, step inside the circle. If a parent or other adult in the household often or very often pushed, grabbed, slapped, or threw something at you, step inside the circle. If a parent or other adult in the household often or very often ever hit you so hard that you had marks or were injured, step inside the circle. If you often felt that no one in your family loved you or thought you were important or special, step inside the circle. If your family lived in extreme poverty, step inside the circle. Step inside the circle. Step inside the circle. Step inside the circle.
is no shame. There is no shame.
I'm so good. Good to see you. How are you? Amen.
Noel.
Noel, good to see you. Welcome. I was abused as a young girl. I was beaten by my mother. I was verbally abused by my mother. I was sexually abused by another man. My father was an alcoholic. My mother was a rageaholic. I've driven drunk. I've sold drugs. I was a juvenile delinquent. Probably my story is similar to most of your stories in here. I'm white and I'm female and nothing happened to me. So, I got a get out of jail free card. And so I'm here now because I see myself in every one of you.
I'm a traumatized child, raised by a traumatized child. My mother was traumatized as well as her parents.
Like he said, we wasn't born in the world of being evil people. My mother didn't want me. She hid her pregnancy. She tried to flush me down the toilet. But as I learned about these things, I always asked myself what was wrong with me.
When I come to the circle and I see everybody else and she's reading off the questions and people stepping in further, and I look at my childhood and I'm like, a lot of these people in this yard are just like me.
There was one step I should have taken that I didn't take, and I saw some of my brothers and my friends take that step, and I felt like such a coward. You know, I wasn't brave enough to be there with them when they took that step. And every round after that, I took the most difficult step.
Our traumas kept us separated. We were all on the circumference, all standing apart. But once we began to acknowledge our traumas publicly, it brought us all closer together.
In prison, you're not supposed to show your weaknesses in prison, though. But to want to do that, to walk in that circle like that, and to take each step forward was a reminder to ourselves that we still have humanity and we worthy to be loved, though. Most people on the outside don't understand it. We want to change so we can re-enter society better than what we left it.
And I think one of the things that when you was yelling at no shame and you had us yelling it out, it was freeing us too. And it was a point to where when I was looking at that and we was all looking at it in a circle, you can hear that echo, no shame. And that was very powerful, especially coming from a little lady like you.
I'm 76 years old. I've seen a lot. I don't like talking. I like to meet people that understand what's happening without words, and you one of them. Today has been one of the best days I had in my whole entire life since I've been out of these 40 years.
So adverse childhood experiences are the single greatest unaddressed public health threat facing our nation today. So I'll stop sharing there and then I have to start again to find one. I have to change it for a second. Can't find it. Oh, no. Maybe it's no. Okay. Right. And this and now I have to find the song. One moment. No. This one. Go back to Zoom and here. So this film is very touching because I don't know what you feel, but I feel it speaks to all of us. How, our pain separates us. And I think it's not all, I know in prison that it's very tough world and that, like one of them said, you're not supposed to show your weaknesses. And what it means then that people hold up a facade that's very tough. And when you realize that these people, as you could see when they were stepping into the circle, they were physically admitting to how they were hurt as children. So she was reading out a list of childhood trauma. And as they stepped into the circle, they showed that, yes, I did experience this. And you could sometimes even see someone looking at the other one with surprise, because they didn't know it about each other. And so opening up and talking about it was like a big relief, and like it opens an opportunity for change. And so trauma, and it's not only childhood trauma. Trauma is not what happened, but trauma is the internal response, means like the wound that was created by a situation. And it can be in the childhood, it can be as a grown-up. It's not only childhood trauma. Trauma are also big and small. They don't have to be car accident or war experiences. But this, to understand that, and the eternal response is like a wound, and that creates a belief. And this is so the belief is like an old unhealed wound, or the wound and the belief go together. Let me see how I click like that. And so one thing is the things that happened, but other things that did not happen, especially as children, there may be things that didn't happen but should have happened, which means unfulfilled basic needs. And a typical basic need as children is to feel a connection, to have a close connection to others. And if that is denied, it creates, it makes us very vulnerable, because it leaves an imprint, and it leaves a belief that we create. We start to believe certain things because of our experience that are often not true. Oh, sorry, I have to do like this. So if we look at BK language, my understanding when I explore this material is that when Baba talks about karmic burden, it's not like a burden that I should feel ashamed about, that I carry around all the bad things I did, but it's much better to look at it as an unhealed wound that needs to be taken care of, not to go around and be ashamed about. And so when we have wounds inside, it's like you can imagine wounds in the soul. I remember listening to a talk by Yogesh, and he talked about, buttons, when somebody press your buttons. And so nowadays, it's very much in the language, psychology language, or in common language, people talk about being triggered. And so means something touches a wound inside me, a part that is very sensitive, and then I react. And so I created this image because I listened to Gabor Mate explaining. He was saying that we carry the machinery, the ammunition, and the explosives. It's all in us. But the trigger is usually something very tiny. So he made this image of a weapon, and you can see the bow arrow show the little trigger. So often we react to very small things. And then we feel shamed because we reacted, or we try to explain it in some way. But I felt that looking into this topic of trauma, I always compare it with myself and with my spiritual development. So how can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? So then, of course, as a Brahmin who wants to change with help of Baba's knowledge, I start to look at myself and think, when do I get triggered and what am I doing when I get triggered? And so triggers is actually a good thing if you take it in the right way. If you take it in a spiritual, from a spiritual perspective, triggers can actually lead you to healing, because triggers can lead you to self-understanding what needs to be healed. So when we get triggered, we sometimes make choices that can have devastating consequences. And then I'm thinking about people in the world, murders happens sometimes very often by impulse because of being triggered. It's not always planned. It sometimes happens because someone reacts too strongly. But thinking from a BK perspective, just self-harm or self-sabotage can be a reaction of being triggered. Addictive patterns, because addiction is a way of, getting away from, escaping from the pain or the horrible experience of feelings. I can avoid silent time because it puts up a mirror or makes me maybe feeling uncomfortable, or it can make me become aggressive. Then you could make a long list, but I just wanted to bring up some examples. But what I feel is important is not to feel, oh, this is bad. No, it's not bad. It's normal. If we think about the situation we are in now, when we are come to the end of the cycle and we are in the time of changing. And so to look at triggers and understand them and be able to look at what do I feel, and not be feeling ashamed of what I feel, because negative feelings can sometimes be very helpful to understand what I need to heal. Because it's human nature to suppress negative experiences. So when we had a bad experience, especially when we were children and we didn't know how to handle it, we often learned from early on to suppress or hide away negative experiences. And that means that it's like wounds that get frozen in time. And if you imagine you have in your home a refrigerator or a freezer, so to keep your things frozen, you have to pay the energy bill. So it's the same with the things that we suppress and keep frozen and don't deal with them. It costs energy. Actually eats a lot of our energy. And for me, it made me think, wow, as a beaker, I can be so tired sometimes. I feel like an old soul, And then it made me think, maybe, the tiredness that overwhelms me sometimes is actually the result of whatever it is I'm suppressing still. Also, unprocessed trauma creates very tight boundaries. Means the belief of what can I do, what can I not do. And so what we know of ourselves today is very limited image. Baba talks about becoming deities, and it's a very far away idea. So then we have these pictures of, deities, these idols in India, and sometimes Baba says they are not true picture because you can't make a picture today that looks like the idol. And often we have these external ideas that we will dance on the grass and whatever, but what is really divine qualities? How would my nature look like when my wounds are healed? that is a different way of looking at the transformation that we are now going through. And what I feel is very important is to understand, when we were hurt, then we draw conclusions of these hurts. And this is called beliefs. So the beliefs is the interpretation, the meaning we make out of it. And typical when you are a small child, if we talk about childhood trauma, if the parents are unhappy and they are unsettled, it's in these days today, most parents have big problems, and so it's difficult to raise children in a very harmonious way. And so if the parents have problem and are not able to care for their child and give the child attention properly, then the interpretation the child makes that I am the reason why my parents are unhappy, I am a bad person, it was my fault, is typical. And that get then registered. So talk about sanskars, how that get registered in our subconscious. And this can follow us whole life. And so typical impression that grown-up people carry, not only children, but I'm a bad person, it was my fault. So even when someone is, typical when a woman is being, or a man even, can be raped, the conclusion that they draw, but even if it's not logical at all, is that it was their fault they got raped. And the next conclusion is, I'm an unworthy person. So it's not uncommon that people commit suicide based on having been harassed, because they can't deal with the pain that they are carrying. So I'm thinking when Baba talks about bhakti, and often in Murlis, just a couple of days ago, Baba was very clear, he was trying to make very clear, bhakti and knowledge are separate things. Bhakti and knowledge is not the same. And for me, bhakti is not only religious beliefs, but it's all kind of beliefs, where I have this idea that blocks me from understanding what Baba is trying to give me, and blocks me from being able to receive what Baba tries to give me. And that is typical, these things that you see listed here. And this thing, the idea that the world is evil, we know it's Kali Yuga. And I think actually it's common in Brahmins to think that the world is evil. It's like you put the blame on Kali Yuga. But it's not really true. The world is in suffering, but there is a lot of goodness in the world still. So I cannot say that the world is evil. This is one of these beliefs or interpretations. And I feel it's important for my spiritual development to understand what are the beliefs I'm carrying. Because when Baba speaks about burdens, and to be free from the burden of karma, I feel it's about being freed from these ideas that are not true. And it can be difficult to see them. It can be very painful to realize that I believe this all this time and it's not true. But at the same time, it's a big release in seeing through them. So trauma, it causes a split. This is typical for what happens. And for me, when I heard that trauma causes a split or a disconnect, I was thinking about how the whole world got disconnected in the beginning of Copper Age. All the countries got separated, how different countries, different languages, how the tree, the branches of the tree, they started to grow out from the beginning of Copper Age. So this is the split. And with the split and the disconnect, there comes also the conflicts. And so disconnect on different levels. So disconnect from my authenticity is one level. And that means, because what does it mean to be disconnected from my authenticity? It's like forgetting my real feelings. And it often happens as with children that, if a parent is tired and doesn't have a level of patience, and the child is expressing, negative feelings, maybe child is upset over something, but the parent is telling the child to stop, giving the message that it's bad to behave like that. The child then have two choices, either to continue to express their real feelings in that moment, or to choose to suppress the real feelings so that they can keep the connection, the intimate connection with the parent, and be accepted. And so, of course, this happens all over the place these days. And so that's a very clear indicator how we lose connection with what we really feel. Because when we start to suppress what we really feel, we'll come to a point when we start to become unsure what we feel. And the next level is we also start to forget or lose connection with what we really need. And this is dangerous, because this is when we start to be please others. And to people pleasing, it can sound bad, but honestly, behind it is just the desire to be in connection. Because one of the deepest pain is to be rejected. No one wants to be rejected. So there is a logic behind why all these things happen. So the first disconnect is a disconnect from my authenticity and from my feelings and knowing what I need. And the next level is disconnect from others. Because when I lose my authenticity, even if I try to be connected, but often the connection is then based on trying to be in connection with others by pleasing or by obeying or whatever things we do, but it's not truthful. It's like a game. And so in this game we play, we also become unsure how to relate to others. And there is a lot of misunderstandings in human relationships. So human relationships have become painful at this time of the cycle. And then the next level is disconnect from the world. And I think often I hear Brahmins say that, I never felt I belonged. I didn't feel I was belonging to the country I was born. I was more belonging to India, maybe, this thinking. But I feel it's not only a sign of being a Brahmin. I think most people today feel alienated and disoriented. And this is, how do I fit in? Where do I fit in? And so many people can today live a life where they try to fit in, where they choose a career not based on their real feelings or what they want, because they don't feel that, but it's more based on what can I get from the world? How can I feel safe in the world? How can I get love from the world? And it's not uncommon that people spend their whole life in a work situation or in an area that actually wasn't their real interest. But it's this thing of being alienated and wanting to fit in. And so it's interesting to see how that connects to trauma. And then, so what we see, what is Baba doing? Baba's whole work is about reconnecting. It's like repairing the whole world and starting from the soul. So starting to repair the soul by reconnecting us with the one soul who has never been traumatized. So the one soul who has never been hurt. The one soul who is always in harmony, in peace, in itself. So Baba is authenticity, always. And I think this word authenticity has become very popular, and I feel it's easier for people to relate to authenticity than to the word purity. But actually it's the same thing. Purity is authenticity. And so Baba is bringing the whole work with understanding, knowledge, and practicing yoga is about reconnecting, repairing. And so Baba talks sometimes about the mala with all the pearls, and he says that you have to come together. And Baba talks about being detached and loving. But we misunderstand sometimes detachment as being on my own and to disconnect. So detachment is always going together with the word love. And the kind of understanding detachment from a proper way is with the love of God. Because only when I experience Baba's love can I feel that I don't feel attracted to take anything, to need anything from others and the world. So it becomes a natural detachment. But to cut yourself away, that is a trauma response. But I think there's so many things like that we have to work through. So, yeah, I could say a lot. So processing trauma is the same. So processing trauma is the word they use in psychology. But processing trauma, it means healing. It means mending. It means reconnecting. And what does it involve? So it involves to acknowledge the emotions and thoughts, not to suppress them. And maybe I should say, because now I speak psychology language, and I have to underline, I'm not a professional, I'm not the psychologist, I'm not formally educated in this. What I am presenting is things I've studied online and in books for the last almost 3 years. So I didn't say that in the beginning, but I think I need to say this because so it's good if you also are aware that I'm not a professional, and we should anyway never take anything black and white as final truth. When Baba says churn knowledge, he actually encourages us to ask ourselves questions. So even when somebody presents something like me, ask questions. I mean, even if you can't do it now, you can do it afterwards, but maybe you can ask questions. Is it right or is it another way? I would like to invite you to explore this field yourselves, to understand more deeply and to compare it with what Baba is teaching us. So what is important for healing trauma, what I learned in the books I read, is that you have to acknowledge the emotions and thoughts. And that's different from suppressing. And then they need to be digested and accepted. So I'm not turning my back to what's happening. And Baba always, and Dadiyank especially, she always were encouraging to be truthful and honest. And truthful and honest, I feel, is always begins with the self. My honesty with others is more my authenticity with others. It's not telling others truths about themselves, but when it comes to being truthful, it's being able to have the power to face and to tolerate, to see my own shortcomings, my own problems, but with love and mercy and compassion. So can I acknowledge the emotions and thoughts? Then next step is to digest and accept. That leads to making this a sense of, if it's a specific event, to make sense of the event, the event that caused the trauma. And what happens then, it integrates. And I've seen this happen, with people who have been deeply traumatized. I've seen this change happen in them, that they couldn't even think on the event. It made them so upset. But then when they decided to actually have a look at it and work on it, they could make sense of it and integrate it. And integrating means that not that what happened hasn't happened, because we cannot change the past, of course not. But it finds its way into the past, it settles into the past without hurting anymore. So when parts of our past is hurting, that is the unhealed wounds. And when the unhealed wounds are being touched, that's why it keeps pulling ourselves. And it's very difficult to move forward spiritually when this keeps pulling us. But when it integrates, it becomes part of the story of the past. It stops to pull my attention. So it's actually a shift in my whole personality, because it was sort of part of my personality to worry about that thing or be heavy about something. But when it stops pulling, lightness comes, the heat disappears, and it becomes neutral information. I can think about it, but it doesn't make me upset anymore. And that's liberation. There is no blame involved in it. That's freedom. So from frozen in time, the things that we have frozen in our subconscious, when they get healed, it is the same as we unfreeze. And when they get unfreezed, there is a release of energy. So I often used to think, when Baba said, you are the embodiment of power, he said that to me personally, but he often said it to people, in the Murli, he says, you are the embodiment of power, and you got all powers when you were born as a BK. I often wonder what he meant, because I didn't feel it. But when you heal trauma, there is a release of power, and you get surprised at the experience. There is an opening, and you start to be open to new opportunities. So all unhealed wounds need healing, whether they are big or small.